Sometimes there are just companies you wished you invested in. I mean, guess how much you'd have today if you invested $100 in GoPro back in 2014? $5. $5.28. You might think of GoPro as that amazing brand that pioneered the action cam market. I mean, I know I did. But the truth is, over the last 8 years, GoPro's share price has absolutely tanked. Investors have lost billions. Shares once valued at a peak of $98 are now trading closer to $5. So where did it all go wrong? Well, to understand what happened, we need to go back to 2002. Nick Woodman, the guy that would eventually become GoPro's founder and therefore a billionaire, was 26 and had just lost $3.9 million worth of other people's money. You see, he had this idea for a company called Funbug, a platform where people played games, sampled products, and referred friends in the hopes that they'd win that week's draw for a cash prize. Funbugs were essentially the raffle tickets that you collected. The more you had, the better your chances. It started in 1999, and by 2001 it was bankrupt and landed him on a website that listed the biggest failures of the dot-com era, company.com. He famously said, "I gave myself till I was 30 to invent a product. If I couldn't do it by then, I would just get a real job." And that fear of a real job, motivated me to be an entrepreneur. But now he was 26, and a failure that had lost millions of investors' money. So with the clock ticking and no idea what his next invention would be, he planned a 5-month surfing trip around Australia and Indonesia. He knew he wanted to take photos of him and his mates out in the surf, but at the time, unless you were a surfing pro with a dedicated photographer, the only shots you could really get were from the shore. And of course that gave him an idea. But he needed to fund it, so he started selling beads and belts that he picked up in Indonesia out of the back of his 1970s Volkswagen. With the $10,000 he made, and the $200,000 he borrowed from his dad, who was a wealthy investment banker, he was on his way. And so, he developed this waterproof camera shell and strap that surfers could use mid-wave. By 2004, he found the perfect camera to fit inside that shell, a 35mm film camera, and was selling the whole package for around $20. In the first year, that product did $150,000 in sales, selling directly to surf shops and small sports retailers out of the back of his van. The next year, he made $350,000, after landing a spot on QVC where he sold over 2,000 cameras in under 10 minutes.
Right, stuff coming up.
Totally secure, but then when you want to take a photograph, it just pivots up. Take the shot.
By 2006, they launched the first ever digital GoPro, the Digital Hero, with a 10-second video limit that looked a bit like this. With the digital version, they saw their sales quadruple, from $800,000 in 2006 to $3.4 million the next year. And so they'd continue to follow this trend of incremental upgrades, releasing a new camera every year or so. But that's not the real reason that in 2013, GoPro was valued at over $2 billion. There were two underlying strategies that were key to GoPro's success. The first was that the product lent itself perfectly to user-generated content. Clips of people using their cameras to capture incredible stunts went viral on platforms like YouTube. From famous athletes to your everyday idiot, anytime you saw someone do something incredible through the view of a fisheye lens, it pointed back to GoPro.
Capturing interesting footage with it and sharing it online is really what's driving GoPro's growth.
A GoPro was always a tool for the job, which is the second reason they exploded. They completely carved out an entirely new section of the camera market. Nick Woodman spotted clear demand for a product that didn't exist in the marketplace. So at the start, they had no real competitors, because if you wanted to capture that kind of point of view shot, a GoPro was what you needed. So after years of increasing sales, in 2013, Foxconn invested $200 million for only a 9% stake, valuing the company at $2.25 billion and making Nick Woodman an instant billionaire.
You're a billionaire, boom, you're a billionaire.
But the hype didn't stop there, because in early 2014, they'd filed with the SEC to take GoPro public.
Tonight, the company we've learned is now worth about $3 billion. It had us thinking, why didn't we think of that?
Within 3 months, investors that bought in at only $24 a share had more than tripled their money. But that was when it all changed. Investors didn't know it, but from the day GoPro filed to take the company public, there were early signs that their profitability would crumble. In the prospectus, which is essentially the document that explains your company to the share market, they said their products positioned GoPro to become an exciting new media company. Clearly, they had big plans beyond just selling cameras. So here's what happened. In 2015, their revenue peaked at $1.6 billion. The next year, it fell to $1.1 billion and stayed that way until the pandemic hit in 2020. But I mean, $1.1 billion. That's a pretty sweet number for a camera company. Well, that was the money coming in. Wait till you see what was going out, because when you look at profit, you get a whole different story. In 2014, the year they went public, they generated 1.4 billion in revenue and kept 112 million in net profit, which means they had a net profit margin of about 8%. In 2015, the next year, they hit that whopping 1.6 billion in revenue. So with a net profit margin of about 8%, you'd expect them to take home about 128 million in profit. But despite making more money, they kept less, keeping only 36 million or 2.2%. Then between 2016 and 2020, all profitability went completely out the window, as they'd go on to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, causing investors to cut their losses and get out. So what went wrong? What caused GoPro to not just lose millions, but the faith of its shareholders? Well, from what I can see, it isn't just one reason. In fact, over the last 8 years, they've made bad decision after bad decision. Remember how GoPro was positioning themselves as an exciting new media company? Well, that's because they knew in the lead up to going public that media businesses often received a higher valuation than hardware businesses. But it wasn't a scam. They did seriously have plans to transform themselves from a company with one product offering into a serious competitor in the entertainment business. They wanted to take on the big players like Netflix, Amazon, Red Bull, and YouTube, who by this point were all producing their own original content. So if they were going to compete, then they only had one option: to build their own platform and start producing their own original content. When looking at the unrealized potential of GoPro transforming itself into a media company, Nick Woodman said, "If we don't, we're always going to sit and wonder why we didn't." So they did, hiring over 100 people to produce content and a brand new software team to build the platform. But as soon as they made that change, they started hemorrhaging money. I mean, at one point they had more than 30 series in the pipeline. Quickly, production budgets 10x'd from $10,000 to over $100,000. The worst part, most of these shows never even aired and the platform never launched. But that wasn't GoPro's only problem.
Many thanks to the universe!
After they went public, Nick started living it big, saying, "If I drive a car to work, who am I kidding?" In 2014, he was the US's highest paid CEO and was valued at over $3 billion. So he bought a private jet, a 180-foot yacht, multiple homes, and vintage cars. Sounds great. But the problem was that that philosophy of spending egregiously carried over to GoPro. In 18 months, they more than doubled their employees from 700 to over 1,800 and went from being an efficient and innovative company to being slow and bloated. While the company was spending millions developing its new product lines like the entertainment business, its core products were suffering. And this was at the time where smartphone cameras and cheaper Chinese alternatives were threatening their core business. A perfect example of GoPro's loss of focus on their core products was with the GoPro Hero 4 Session. It was essentially a mini version of the Hero 4 with no display and just one button to start recording. Originally, it was meant to be their entry-level offering at $199 and would have provided brilliant value beside their $399 flagship model. The problem was that they were so overconfident in their brand that their senior vice president of communications said, "We thought we could just throw the thing out the door and charge $399. They'll buy it because it's GoPro." Not only was it now competing against their flagship model at the same price, but they also did little to no advertising, just assuming that the product would go viral and generate its own sales.
That's the future right there.
Oh my god. But that is insane.
They quickly realized the Hero 4 Session was pricing itself out of the market, so dropped it by $100 2 months after launch and another $100 3 months after that.
Hero 4 Session just got a new price today. It's $199.
That quarter, Q4 2015, was the first time since they went public that they announced negative quarterly profit. But 2016 wasn't any better. Things got a whole lot worse. They released the new GoPro Hero 5 that was their first camera to be waterproof without its plastic housing. Except it wasn't. Quality control issues meant one part of the camera's body was only 0.2 millimeters thick and would just buckle under water pressure. And alongside the release of the Hero 5 was their new drone called the GoPro Karma. It was released to compete with DJI, who by this point was quickly capturing the drone market. They really needed it to work because GoPro Karma was one of those projects absolutely hemorrhaging money. Originally, they planned to do a joint venture with 3D Robotics, essentially putting their brand on an already existing drone. But that fell through, meaning they had to completely design the drone in-house, which cost them nearly $96 million. But shortly after these drones launched, videos like this were posted to YouTube. A latch on the battery was coming loose, causing drones to lose power and fall out of the sky. Other than hurting someone, which thankfully they didn't, that's about the worst thing that could happen to the launch of a new drone. So Nick Woodman recalled all 2,500 drones that had been sold, and after relaunching them shortly, the project was entirely scrapped in 2018. The problem was that even without the battery issues, they still couldn't compete with DJI on price, and had already missed out on a first mover advantage. And that was a real turning point for GoPro. Up until that point, each department was acting as its own separate unit, meaning the company wasn't very efficient or well aligned as a whole. After their business literally fell from the sky, Nick decided the company needed to go back to what it was good at and focus on steady growth rather than exploding into another new industry. This meant laying off 500 people and demolishing the entertainment division that they'd spent years building. Nick said, "We decided to simplify everything and get back to the business we knew and loved as a private company." So in 2021, they recorded their first year of profitability after 5 years of losses, generating $371 million in net profit. Last year, 2022, that figure dropped to 29 million. So did Nick Woodman turn the business around, or does it all look like it's about to collapse once again? Well, since the introduction of GoPro Plus in 2018, they've been slowly transforming their business model. Today, if you want to buy a GoPro, you have two options. Buy it in-store for $550 or online through GoPro for $350. You literally save $200 off its recommended retail price by buying it online. So how do they justify that massive loss? Well, included in that $350 price tag is a subscription to GoPro Plus, giving you unlimited cloud storage, no questions asked camera replacement, and access to their mobile app. Essentially, for $200 less, the consumer gets the camera and a year's subscription. So it feels like a no-brainer. This new model might feel like a steal, but it's also great for GoPro. By incentivizing people to purchase online directly through them, they save the profit they would have shared with retailers. On top of that, they're also signing you up to a yearly subscription, which means every single month they've got recurring revenue coming in. That helps to flatten the seasonality of GoPro purchases. Finally, they now have you in their database, and their financial statements back it up. Subscription revenue now equals over $100 million with 70 to 80% gross margins. That means after paying costs directly related to the subscription, like hosting the cloud storage, they're pocketing between $70 to $80 million a year. They also state that their direct-to-consumer sales, essentially GoPro.com, now equates to 40% of their revenue, and that a subscription is becoming synonymous with a GoPro camera owner. Subscriptions increase each customer's lifetime value, as what was once just a one-off purchase is now yearly revenue at high margins. GoPro says that of GoPro.com sales, 90% of people attach a subscription. So does that mean it's all looking positive for GoPro? Well, no. Over the last few years, they've been facing overheating issues with some of their cameras, and loyal customers aren't happy. Also, what was up with that $300 million decrease in net profit between 2021 and 2022? Well, inflation meant an increase in manufacturing costs and a decrease in overall demand. Also, last year the US dollar rose significantly against foreign currencies, meaning they either had to increase the price of their products in countries outside of the US or take home less profit. So saying it's been a challenging, well, 8 years would be saying the least. At this point, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Will they ever return to being the giant that they were back in 2014? I don't know, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.